Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results. Hi, I'm Perry Holley, a Maxwell Leadership Facilitator and Coach.
And I'm Chris Goede, Executive Vice President with Maxwell Leadership. Welcome and thank you for joining. Perry and I are super excited for you to be listening to today, watching maybe on YouTube, have a guest in the studio with us who is like-minded. We are dialed in when it comes to the importance of leading people and values and culture. And we're going to talk about that today in just a minute. Before we get started, I'd love for you to download the Learner's Guide, or as always, Perry needs help with content. And so if you want to go and click on this podcast at maxwellleadership.com/podcast, and then this episode, if you click on that, there'll be a form there where you can say, hey, I got a question. I'm dealing with this leadership issue. Hey, we would love that because we want to take and unpack for you something that's impacting you, that's going on in the field. That's what we talk about a lot, is what our coaches and our facilitators are experiencing around the world. We want to bring those to you guys and let other people learn from it, right? That's how we learn best. So today's topic is Culture Matters with Jenni Catron. And why we're super excited about this is because I'm holding a book that has a title that we are very, very excited about. It's something that we talk about a lot about here that John Maxwell completely lives out. He talks about culture all the time. And Maxwell Leadership got to join in partnership with you to publish this book. And so I am super excited to introduce you to our audience, introduce our audience to you as well. This is coming out in February.
February 11th.
February 11th, yeah. So you're going to be able to get this book in partnership with Maxwell Leadership about Culture Matters. So welcome. Thank you for being here. I know you run an organization, you speak, you got a podcast.
Sure.
And so tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about what is going on in the leadership world. And then we're going to dive into this topic, culture, that you are super passionate about right now.
For sure. Well, Chris and Perry, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.
You guys are coaching me regularly through the podcast, so it's really fun to be here and just get to dive into some conversations that we do have so much shared passion about. I kind of accidentally landed in leadership and culture, just didn't think that those were going to be my passion points. And I'm sure we'll tell some stories along the way that will reinforce why that became such a big driving factor for the work that I do now. But I had the privilege of working in the corporate world for about a decade. Then I went into ministry world as an executive director for another 12 years. And then I launched a company called the Foresight Group. And like you guys, I just get the privilege of working with leaders day in and day out, helping them think through how do they become effective and healthy leaders? How do they build thriving and effective teams? And so that's what my world looks like. It's a lot of fun.
So you just flew right by. I spent time in corporate America, and then also 12 years in ministry and ended up talking about culture, leadership, a lot of other things. But real quick, before we jump into the content, are there a lot of similarities, if you look back, between culture in the, we'll call it for-profit world versus culture in the nonprofit world? And if there are, just off the top of your head, what are your thoughts about the dynamics between the two, though? Because we have a lot of for-profit organizations and business leaders and teams that listen to this, but we do have some nonprofit as well, because I think there's a crossover. But I would love for you, I mean, you lived it both and now you've written a culture book. Just talk to that for real quick before we dive in.
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, at the end of the day, people are people, right?
That's
and
right.
that's the dynamic that we're navigating, whether it's corporate world or the nonprofit world, is that people are people. They're complex, they're messy, they're challenging to lead. And regardless of the environment, sometimes you might...
I've been trying to tell Perry that for a long time. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
So
it's just part of it.
At the end of the day,
right.
It's just part of it. And it's understanding what's my belief about how I want to lead people, and then how does that show up wherever I am.
So good. That's so good.
Well, I was telling a group last week, they said this leadership would be okay if it weren't for the people.
That's right.
That's right.
People are messy. Let's figure this one out. So I really enjoyed the books. Thank you. I got a preview copy, and so we teach a lot on culture. It's a big topic for our followers. What I really loved is you put a framework in there, and I just wondered if and kind of an operating system for culture. Yeah. And I don't think I had thought about it that structured before, but tell me a little bit about having a framework. Does it help you when you're teaching and consulting in your work? Does it help to have this framework? Do people buy into that? Do they glom onto that pretty quick?
That seems to be the thing that is the aha moment for people. I think most of us would agree culture matters, right? Like
You should name a book.
How about it?
That's
Didn't even do that on purpose that time.
Yeah.
But everybody agrees culture matters. In fact, there's some research that said 90% of leaders believe that an employee engagement strategy will have an impact on their business, but only 25% of them have a plan. And so the majority of us say, hey, this matters. We need to do this. But only 25% of us have a plan. And that was kind of a aha for me and I'll give you a little backstory, but just because I think this might be helpful to our listeners as well. But I had really unique experiences starting out. I worked in the music business in Nashville, was the corporate experience. And it was my first job out of college. Amazing team. I worked for this division that was part of a larger company. In fact, it was the biggest record company in the world at the time. But we were this small little division in Nashville that was fantastic. Like amazing team, great leaders. I'm, kind of thrown in the deep end as a young leader and just given lots of opportunity, lots of coaching and feedback, and given this great experience to lead. 8 years later, we went through a corporate merger. They merged us with one of the other divisions of the company. And overnight, the culture went from amazing to 100%. Awful. Like all of a sudden, I hated going to work, and I'd never had that experience. So I'm a spoiled 20-something. Right. My first work experience is
amazing.
It's fantastic. And then I go to this other environment, and I'm like, what has just happened? And then I stayed a year only because one of my previous leaders said, Jenni, will you please give it a year? He was actually the president of the previous division. And he was like, would you just give it a year? And out of honor to him, I said, I'll give you a year. And I still was like, I can't do it. Like this, I'm not thriving in this environment. And then I moved to nonprofit. And I was the executive director of the organization. And I realized I am now sitting in the seat where I have disproportionate influence on the culture. Like now I'm the one shaping the experience. And I've had these two really stark experiences. What do I do with that? So long answer to your question, Perry. Sure. But I started to just unpack this going, what created those two different experiences? And I began to reflect on other things throughout my story and history where I'd had similar dynamics and I'd seen other leaders have, the same thing. And we, as leaders, we want it to be about people. And yet that feels organic and that feels like, and what I began to discover is that just like every other key initiative, we build strategies for like our annual goals and plans, our mission and vision. We give tons of time and energy to put it on paper, get it mapped out. But rarely do we do that with culture. And I felt like that was the distinctive. So that's what I began to work on and build.
And I love that. I think so many people we talk to could have the pro and con version. That most of them have never seen the stark difference. They're just in a culture that's not that great. But you saw what a great looked like, and then you knew what it wasn't. So a lot of times we go in and go, "What do you mean that something's wrong?" I said, "It's not working." Why? What's not working? Oh, our people. Oh, the culture. Oh, everything's not working, and they don't understand the difference between the two. So,
and there's no plan. I love your statement about. You said once I realized I was the executive director, I have a disproportionate impact on the culture. Leaders, listen, I'm telling you that is such a true statement, and we don't think about it, and we go, oh, we have X, Y, Z, we got to do the P&L, we got to EBITDA, and yet we are the ones that are leading that have the most impact on what that culture looks like, and so it's even more important for us to have a plan. The other thing I want to just stop on for a minute, you talked about the merger and everything changed. Perry and I are in organizations all the time. And I'll say there are often three things that I've seen a lot of that impact culture right away. Number one would be unions. And then I just go, sorry, we can't help you. And I can help you with your team, maybe not the culture. Second one is explosive growth. And the third one is mergers and acquisitions.
For sure. Yeah.
It happens. There is one that's going to win. And hopefully the leader of the one that's going to win is being very intentional about that and not just letting it happen, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Sure.
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
I want to shift to, because this is another place where we are directly aligned, is the importance of values. Mm-hmm. And we believe personal values, but also organizational values to be more than just something that's on the wall, right? It's a big part of that culture development. In the book, you talk a lot about this and identifying and defining kind of the organizational's core values. Sure. Why is that so important for a leader of a team or an executive director of an organization, whatever it might be, to start at that point?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think values have gotten a lot of lip service over the last probably couple decades of work. And I think in some ways we're a little tired of them as leaders, right? Like values, okay, we have them.
Didn't we put those on a coffee mug already?
Yes, we've already done that. It didn't work. I hear that time and time again. But I still am a deep believer, and you have values whether you've acknowledged them or not. There are values that guide the behavior of your organization, and that's the key, right? The values that are shaping how we behave. So a lot of times the ones that are on the wall are not actually the values happening in the organization, or even the values you hold as a leader and hold people to. And so my conviction on it is we've got to get really honest about what's really true. Like, what are we maybe unintentionally or accidentally valuing versus what we aspire to value? And then beginning to put more language and more structure around that to give it a lot of depth and a lot more hooks for the employees to kind of grab onto and go, okay, this is what that means and this is what that looks like. Because we've all seen the, integrity, honesty, character, like thrown on the wall, which we're all saying, of course we want those things. But you got to go a little deeper to say, what is it that's really critical and distinctive to us? Because that's the other thing. It's like there's plenty of things that every organization aspires to. Again, hopefully, back to integrity, honesty, character. Like those are things that we just want to be true. We need to vet those out in hiring, right? But like, what are the things that are actually truly distinct about us? Yeah. And how do we more deeply embed those?
How do we live that out, right?
That's right.
And as leaders, we talk about defining reality, financially, issues, but you need to do it. What I'm hearing you say is we need to do that with our values as well. We need to make sure what is reality with the values that we're living out, and where's the gap between that? And I love what you said about the values. John has said oftentimes he's just leadership sad right now because of what he would say is we got a values problem.
Sure.
Not only in the country, whatever, but in leadership. There's a lot of people that have just said, I'm tired of these, we're going to do this, and we have a values problem. So
And so one thing I really liked about the book and why you want to get a copy of this is that you offer a lot of tools and ways of thinking of things that people can really apply real time. And I thought one thing I liked around values, you kind of put together a values grid. Mm-hmm. And what I loved about it was we're passionate about, you got to determine what it is you stand for. So what is your core value? But not only that, the behaviors, the actions, and so you kind of put all that together. Can you talk us through the values grid and how a company could use that?
Yeah, and I think this one evolved over time for me as I began to just kind of workshop, okay, we know values are important. And then, but what gives them more life, more depth, more hooks again for the handles for the team to really take it in. So you come up with your value. Just what's that core value? A big one for me is ownership, right? I want my entire team owning what we do and how we do it.
Love it.
But what's the belief behind that? Right? Like, and that's the next step I usually take teams through is like, okay, let's come up with our list of values, the things that, again, we think are kind of distinct to us. But then what's the why? Why does that matter? Why is that important? One of the ones that we have at Foresight is self-leadership. And we say we have to lead ourselves well to lead others better. Like if we're not learning, growing, continuing to improve as leaders, how in the world can we invest in other leaders? So that's the why, that's the belief. Then it's the behavior. Well, what does that look like in practice? Now, I can't account for every minute behavior of the team, but I can start to give a handful of like this is what this looks like. This is a commitment to continuous learning that we commit to. Every one of us is making sure we have the certifications or the training in the areas of interest we're most passionate about, or we have a commitment to an annual retreat as a team where we're learning and growing together. It's like coming up with those handful of things that say, this is what this looks like. This is how we play this out. And then the fun part is to give it the sticky statement. The fun phrase, or sometimes it's a story, so figuring out, there's another one that one of the organizations that I led, we had a communication or a value of collaborative communication. Well, that's a snoozer of a statement, right? Like, it's like, woo, collaborative communication. That sounds awesome. But we don't know we all need it, right? So this was an organization with multiple locations, and they were seeing the breakdowns between location to location, et cetera. So then we said, well, what's the belief? Well, communication is an act of respect to our coworkers, right? Like, high communication is really showing respect for our coworkers. That was our core belief. Our behaviors were, hey, who needs to know? What do they need to know? And why do they need to know it? If I ask myself those three questions, all of a sudden communication gets better. If I'm just thinking on behalf of others and asking myself a couple of questions, I will improve my communication. And our sticky statement was, use your blinker. Because I told the story.
I that. I go, where did finish that? How did you get to that? Yeah.
We had an internal little story about I call it efficient driving style. Most people would say
aggressive.
I might be aggressive.
Maybe. I'm married to one. Yes,
okay, so you get it.
There's nothing defensive. It's very offensive, maybe literally, and aggressive. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So the team knew that, and we would joke about if we're going to lunch together, they'd run with me because we were going to get there first.
How'd you hear that first? I love it. Another thing we have in common. There's a little bit of competitive.
Right? Yeah. There for sure is. For sure is. So I was telling the staff this story, and I was like, but here's the thing. If you notice, I religiously use my turn signal, because if you're moving fast, if you're not communicating well, you're going to crash, right? So right there, collaborative communication, this snoozer of a statement took new life.
That's awesome.
And so
Great
use your
story.
blinker became the way we said that value. And you guys, to this day, I haven't worked with that team for like over 12 years. To this day, I get emails from some of that staff saying, hey, using my blinker, thought you'd want to know this. And so that's when values give life and depth to a culture and help employees really see this is how we show up, how we work together.
That's why we were in Temecula last week. I love how they did a similar thing when we were going through their culture, but one of them was can't stop, won't stop. And
I love that.
And they said, how did that become their sticky statement from, well, you need to be persistent, we need customer service, we need to, every guest, we need to make, and we can't stop, won't stop. And they did, now that's their battle cry almost. Somebody said, should we do this for this guest? Can't stop, won't stop. And then it puts legs on it, so they go to work with it. So
that's really cool.
So we in this room are very passionate about this topic, understand the importance of it, and we know that it's going to happen one way or another. Our culture, it's either going to happen by accident, right? Like you talked about, or
not have a culture.
You can't not have a culture, to your point. And so let's go back a little bit and think about some leaders you've worked with, or some reasons behind what stops a leader from designing a culture. Like what's the where they just don't get over that hump? What is something that maybe they don't even realize they're listening right now? They're not aware of it, but it could be a blind spot. It could not be. But what is that hurdle that's keeping them from designing a culture?
Usually, I think it's just busyness. I think it's all of the other expectation and priorities that are pulling on their time and energy, or it might be a little like lack of understanding of what to do, right? I think what I often see for leaders is they will expect culture to be caught. So as long as you have proximity to that leader, then you kind of catch what they value, what's important to them, and this is how we do things here, right? But as soon as the team gets a little bit bigger, and of course, you've got more to manage. There's more responsibility on your plate. You have so much going on that it's getting the back burner. And you're just kind of hoping the things that people kind of accidentally picked up in some ways are going to filter to the new team members. Well, it never happens. And that's why the plan is so important, right? In that actually knowing, hey, here's the system. Here's how we make sure the things that are most important to us are actually replicated throughout the organization. But I think it's usually just all the pressures of a million other things.
Everything else going on.
Yeah, and I've noticed that I've been a senior executive, so our CEO put in he had a very strong core value statement. He knew what we believed in, had 4 or 5 things. We had a direction. The senior team, we were all bought in. We heard it every day.
Yeah.
And then the people below us, they heard it from us, but it gets diluted.
That's right.
If it goes, is there and this will be the last thing when you probably need to wrap up, but I really was getting, what you were saying, that is the front lines are really where I need it. I need that. I need them to feel the culture. I need them to live and breathe the culture, because they're the ones that are interfacing with our customers and our clients and our teams. Is there in this format you use, is there a way? Do you have a way of getting it from all the way down through the organization? Is there?
Yeah. One of the tools that we built into the framework is something I call the employee journey grid. I'm simple. Values grid, employee journey grid. Like, not complicated.
Our kind of people.
I love it. Yes. I can do that.
I can do that. But it basically looks at, all the key points in an employee's journey with the organization, from even the interviewing and hiring process to onboarding to performance plans to meeting rhythms, and where do our values and other things that we've defined are important to our culture. But I feel like values really are the anchors to defining culture, and then you kind of layer onto that. But we look at all of those different steps of an employee's engagement with the organization, even to departures. Do our departures and how we handle departures reflect the best of who we are? Because that's shaping culture for the team members who are staying. How they see us handle departures impacts their perception of leadership and trust of leadership.
Not taught. I mean, they're watching everything.
Everything. Yeah. So it's looking at that and going, how do I ensure that every employee at every level, at every stage of their engagement with us, is repeatedly being reminded of who we are and how we work together.
Yes, fantastic.
That's so good. I want to wrap up, and then I'll throw it to you to put a bow on it for us. But this conversation exceeded my expectations. Like, it's just great to get in a room and talk about this. Is what we're passionate. 3 of us is what we talk about all the time with organizations around the world. Before I wrap up with some thoughts, February 11th, 2025, Culture Matters will be out.
That's right.
And tell our listeners where they can find you. Like, where's the best place just to connect with you or find you before I wrap up for us?
Well, first of all, I'd love to just say, go to culturemattersbook.com.
Okay, perfect.
And there's a bunch of pre-order materials. So if you pre-order it before February 11th, you're going to get the first 3 chapters of the book. You're going to get a workbook. You're going to get a masterclass, everything to kind of get you going on actually implementing the framework. But that also takes you to my website, where you can just connect with me. I'm on all the social media channels at Jenni Catron. So
perfect.
Love to connect.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. As I wrap up, I'm going to give a couple of thoughts. We talk a lot about values and understanding that. And I think what we talked about today, and even in the book, you'll learn a lot more about that driving the culture. And a couple of things I wrote down was, it's our guide for decision-making as a leader, right? I heard you talking about, hey, our CEO, we got it as the leadership team, but then that level had to get it. Well, that's also with the engagement level of an organization too, right? Like, the people that work for you, the engagement level is driven by you, not necessarily the CEO. It's the same thing with the values and the culture. We have to live this out at every single part of our organization, because it shapes the behavior. It's how we attract and retain talent, right? Like, how are we showing up every day? Do people want to stay there? We have a phrase we talk about where we say, how people experience you is how they then begin to expect you, or how you're going to show up. And by the way, that's your leadership brand. And so hopefully that brand of yours is in alignment with the culture of the organization that you're working in. Otherwise, we might be creating a word we don't like around here, which is subcultures from where that organization really wants to be. So thank you so much for being here, pouring into us, and writing the book. There's not enough content out there on culture and the importance of it, and we're glad to have you. So, Perry, why don't you close us out?
What a great conversation. As a reminder, if you'd like to get those great offers that Jenni made, you can go to culturemattersbook.com and follow the directions there, and you'll get some extra downloads and some things you can use. If you'd like to leave us a comment or a question to learn more about our offerings or other podcasts in our podcast family, you can do that at maxwellleadership.com/podcast. We always love hearing from you. We're very grateful you'd spend this time with us. That's all today from the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast.
Are you ready to elevate your leadership to new heights? Join the movement towards High Road Leadership with John C. Maxwell's latest book. In High Road Leadership, John explores the power of valuing all people, doing the right things for the right reasons, and placing others above personal agendas. Learn how to inspire positive change and bring people together in a world that divides. Order now and receive exclusive bonuses, including a keynote on high road leadership by John Maxwell himself and a sneak peek into 3 impactful chapters. Take the first step towards becoming a high road leader. Visit highroadleadershipbook.com to order your copy today.